$1.2 million each year. That's a lot of money. Do I have your attention? $1.2 million. That's how much a single operator was able to save every single year by making one small change to the technology that they use in the cockpit. Most pilots drag around a flight bag full of stuff. The heaviest parts of that, charts and books and manuals. A typical pilot's flight bag weighs an average of 35 pounds. What if we could replace that 35-pound large bag with a small device that only weighs 1.5 pounds? Wouldn't it be nice to have an electronic version of that flight bag? Because American Airlines got rid of the large flight cases full of charts that each pilot had to drag around and switched to using these 1.5-pound electronic flight bags, they estimate that every year they save $1.2 million in fuel burn. When I worked for Hendrick Motorsports, rather than have the pilots drag their flight bags around, we used to just stock the airplanes with all of the charts and manuals that were necessary. We had an aircraft operating manual that was over 1,200 pages long and held in 2 large binders. In addition to that, we had the airplane flight manual. That was about 600 pages in another binder. We had 14 binders full of charts, and then we had various company manuals. Over 80 pounds worth of manuals. We had to store these in the closet up front near the cockpit. We got approval to use electronic flight bags. We were able to remove 80 pounds from every aircraft and replace them with a pair of 1.5-pound EFBs. The problem we've got right now is that we have technology that enhances safety and efficiency. But for various reasons, many pilots and operators are still reluctant to embrace this technology. So let's discuss, what is an EFB? How do EFBs help us? What rules do or don't apply to the use of EFBs? What are the common excuses that we come up with to not try EFBs? And why you should give it a shot? We'll start by defining what an EFB is. The FAA defines an EFB, or electronic flight bag, as an electronic system intended primarily for flight deck use that includes the hardware and software necessary to support the intended function. EFB devices can display a variety of aviation data or perform basic calculations. In the past, some of these functions were traditionally accomplished using paper references or were based on data provided to the flight crew by an airline's flight dispatch function. The scope of the EFB functionality may include various other hosted databases and applications. So now that we've read the FAA's opinion on what an EFB is, what does that mean to us? Well, the first important point is the EFB is the combination of both the hardware and the software. It's not one or the other, it's both. The second point the FAA makes is that one of the primary functions of the EFB is to replace the need for paper publications, such as charts and manuals. They also reference that some EFBs may perform calculations. They also talk about various other hosted databases and applications being available to EFBs. And we'll discuss that in more detail in a moment. So, now that we know what an EFB is, what do they do for us? Well, they save a lot of weight and space, as we previously mentioned in the examples. They also allow for quicker lookup of information as opposed to sifting through volumes of paper charts or paper manuals. I was flying in a Learjet going from New Haven, Connecticut to Portland, Maine. We'd had a problem the day before with a fuel pressure indication, and the local mechanic had gotten on the phone with the Bombardier Service Center located at Bradley Field near Hartford, Connecticut, and discussed how to troubleshoot the problem and fix it with them. He thought he had it repaired. We took off the following day from New Haven, and shortly after takeoff got a fuel pressure low warning light. We decided the smartest thing to do was to divert to Bradley Airport because Bradley was very close to where we were and happened to, by a stroke of luck, be the location of the Bombardier Service Center where the experts on Learjets were. So we tried to look up the chart for Bradley, and we couldn't find it. We looked everywhere. We pulled out our big paper set of binders and found the Connecticut binder, and we looked for Hartford, the city that is served by Bradley Airport. Couldn't find it. Turns out the airport's actually in the city of Windsor Locks near Hartford, and so it's under W. Took us quite a while to find it. Even though we could see on our moving map display that we were right next to BDL Airport, we couldn't find the chart for it for several minutes. If we had had EFBs, we could have simply typed BDL, or done a search by nearby cities, or airport names. We could have found that chart probably in about 10 seconds instead of taking 4 or 5 or 6 minutes to find it during a busy time, in flight, bouncing around in turbulent conditions with a big yellow warning light flashing at us. Wouldn't it have been better to have the EFB? I think so. Also, the charts on EFBs are zoomable. How often have you looked at a sectional chart and you just can't see the detail in there? Wouldn't it be nice to just zoom in? Or you want to see the entire route, but you don't want to have to fumble around flipping pages of your chart or finding the adjoining chart. Wouldn't it be nice to zoom out or scroll over? You can do that with a tablet-based EFB. The manuals are searchable. Flying along, need to look up something about a system that's acting strangely? Instead of sifting through the manual page by page, pull up the manual on your EFB and type in a keyword search. EFBs may also include performance calculators, such as weight and balance tools. Punching in a few numbers into a calculator and hitting compute is so much easier than going through big spaghetti charts and trying to figure out, am I within my center of gravity? Do I have enough performance to take off on the short runway on a hot day? EFBs can do these functions for us. In addition, many EFBs may include add-ons that allow the overlay of weather, traffic information, GPS position, backup flight instruments such as AHRS, display of NOTAMs, and TFRs. Rules. If we're flying privately, the rules are simple. There actually aren't any. We do have some guidance publications, but there are no rules that say that we cannot use these devices. For those of you that fly under airline or charter rules, fractional rules, or fly large aircraft for private corporations under Part 125, there's a little bit of regulatory information out there. You may not use EFBs unless you have an op spec for them. And those of you that fly under those kinds of rules should know what an op spec is, but you must call up your principal operations inspector with the FAA and gain approval in the form of an op spec. The guidelines for approval are contained in Advisory Circular 120-76, and the guidelines for the use of EFBs are contained in Advisory Circular 91-78. Keep in mind, if you're not flying commercially, no approval is necessary. Use common sense. Two key elements in the guidance that pertain to the commercial operation side of things. The unit you use must be capable of passing a decompression test. For a long time, this was the biggest reason that commercial off-the-shelf hardware items such as the iPad or the Windows tablet could not be used. Only dedicated EFBs that were purpose-built were approved initially. And this was because nobody had data proving that something like an iPad could be taken up to, say, 41,000 feet and exposed to a rapid decompression and continue to function. Several years ago, the Jepson Company, in an effort to sell their EFB application products and their subscriptions to charts, actually funded a study where they performed experiments on Apple iPads and iPad minis and documented proof that they meet the decompression standards. Subsequent tests have been run on other tablets, such as the Windows tablets, that prove that they are also compliant, so they are approvable. So when we fly privately, we don't need any type of approval. We should use common sense. We should bring a backup battery or a charger and have a plan of action in case we have a problem. But we we don't specifically need any written procedures that are approved. We don't need permission to use these. The common excuses people give for not using EFBs. First one is the mistaken belief that they are not approved equipment. This is mostly common amongst private pilots, private flyers. We believe that, well, the paper charts are government approved and the EFB is not. This is just not true. The only rule that actually applies to carrying charts when you're flying privately is that you must carry the appropriate navigation information for the route you intend to fly and the airports and facilities you intend to use. All the major EFB software manufacturers provide data that is either drawn directly from the government databases that they use for making their paper charts, or in the case of Jepson, from their own database, which complies with FAA and international standards. It's the same information that goes into the paper charts. You have the valid information if you have the EFB. You meet the standards. There's no approval necessary. So the idea that this is not approved just doesn't apply to private flying. A lot of people are fearful of getting a dead battery or having a malfunction. But this is something we can easily address. Have your own policy that you will not take off on a flight unless your battery is 90% or higher. Charge it before flights. Bring a backup battery or a charging unit that you can plug into an outlet in the aircraft. Many people believe that EFBs are not as reliable as paper charts. They say, well, my paper chart never ran out of battery. Yeah, well, a long time ago I was flying along in my 172 and it was a hot day, so I opened up the window. Whoops. My sectional chart blew right out that window. Yeah, not my finest moment. The point is, even though paper charts don't fail often, they can fail. If it blows out the window, it's not working for you. The EFBs are quite reliable, and if we have some form of a backup, such as a spare battery pack or a charger, we've mitigated a significant portion of that risk. Take steps to mitigate that risk, and it should not ever be a significant problem for you. Some people complain that I'm just not tech savvy. These are too hard to learn. A few weeks ago, I had to pick up a plane in Bangor, Maine and fly it to Anchorage. I had a pilot with me. He was the senior most pilot in the company. Had never used an EFB before. Since we were on a ferry flight and flying under Part 91, there was no restriction against using an EFB, so we brought along a couple of iPads with the for-flight EFB application loaded onto them. I spent 20 minutes sitting with Lloyd before we took off, showing him some of the basics. And then we got in the plane and flew. He had no trouble using all the basic necessary functions to navigate, pull up the charts. We only spent 20 minutes of informal time learning, and he was ready. He used it very effectively, had no problems, and by the end of the flight, he was completely proficient in it. He went around telling everybody after that how great these things were going to be and how he couldn't wait till our company got approval to use them for their regular airline operations. It's not hard to learn. Some people complain that they're afraid of increased head down time looking at these iPads. But the head down time required to use the iPad or an equivalent tablet is no more than that we experience with paper charts. In fact, many times we spend more head down time not looking at the instruments and time not looking out the window for traffic. We spend more head down time trying to find the right chart or the right page when we're using paper products. Some people are concerned about the cost, but the subscription to the electronic database is actually cheaper than a subscription to all the paper charts that the electronic database can replace. So, you should give EFBs a try because they will save weight, they will save space, they will reduce your pilot workload, and in reducing your pilot workload, they will help you increase your situational awareness. They will increase your safety and your efficiency. I strongly recommend that those of you that fly privately, try out an EFB. Give it a shot. You're going to like it. You're going to find out that it helps you do things much more efficiently. For those of you that fly under air carrier type rules, encourage your management to seek approval to get EFBs. Your company will save time, they will save money, they will see an increase in efficiency and an increase in safety. Bottom line, don't be afraid of change. Embrace it. Give it a shot. You won't be disappointed.